you as we break open the Gospel reading again, 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And from Eau Claire in Wisconsin, we have Jerry. From Christchurch in New Zealand, I believe. We have Ben and Jenny in Pukerua Bay. Welcome to you as well. Thank you for being here, all three of you. And Jerry, you're armed with background.
So I love doing the background of this because I love the Gospel of Mark, and this passage is the turning point in the Gospel. As you go through the story, as you follow the theme of the messianic secret, all the way up to this point, Jesus has been concealing himself and telling everybody else to conceal him from others until finally, alone with his disciples, he asks them, "Who do people say I am?" And they give him several options. And he says, "Well, and who do you say?" And Peter comes out with, "You are the Christ." Jesus really wanted his disciples to figure that out for themselves, apparently. And from this point on, his teaching, at least for the disciples, changes. And he begins teaching them precisely who he is and how he is different from what they were expecting. And he starts right away, right here in this passage that we have today, as he begins the first of three times trying to tell them that he has come to die, to be beaten, to be rejected, and then to rise again. And each of the three times, the disciples spectacularly miss the point, as we'll see the first example here. But this is the moment when everything changes, when Jesus changes his teaching, and when the disciples begin to get the idea that he was not who they had ever thought he could be.
Thank you. And it just reinforces what an incredible craftsman Mark is, too, in his telling of the Jesus story. But let's talk about challenge. And Jenny, let's ask you to start talking about the challenge for you.
Yes, the challenge is the command to silence. It's so typically Markan. Don't talk any more about this. And it seems that Jesus did it because of the current understanding of Messiah, either political nationalism or a divine miracle worker. And of course, what he was really on about was that he would be killed and would be crucified. And he didn't want people talking about this understanding of Messiah that was such a falsity. And I'm thinking the command to silence is very interesting in that it invites us, or to be, not to do, to hold things close and to ponder deeply. And so, yeah, that's my response.
What a lovely angle. Thank you for that. Ben, what were you at as a challenge for you?
The whole passage is pretty challenging, full of challenges.
Yeah.
You know, the forced decision, right? Name it. Who do you say that I am? The denial of self, the Son of Man must go through suffering. For me, I was struck by the denial of self, and particularly asking the question, what precisely of the self am I denying? Thinking about it in a communal context, you know, because the disciples were communal people. I suspect they wouldn't have heard it initially as a deny the individual self. So what does it mean to deny the communal self, deny your family roots, deny something heritage? But also for me as I'm just a millennial, we're famously underdeveloped in our understanding of ourselves. First, I need to know something of the self that I'm supposed to be denying. It reminded me of Joy Cowley's poem Kenosis, where she struggles with this a little bit. And there were two wee passages from there that I'd love to read out because it helped me with the challenge. She writes, "Jesus, I need your sense of timing. I am so keen to grow that I want all seasons at once, to flower, bear fruit, die to self, before self is fully grown." And then she continues, "I must draw life into myself and mature to the fullness God has planned for me. When my time has come, my ego will split wide open like the ripened seed pod it should be, and empty itself for others." So it's really helpful framing of that question and challenge around what is the self that I'm denying.
Thank you indeed. And thank you, Joy Cowley, who's no longer with us, of course, but what a wonderful explication of the self-emptying of Christ, the self. Jerry, challenge for you.
A part of the denial of self is also, this one's less obvious, but fairly clear, is the denial of our plans. Because the disciples had plans, what this Messiah was going to be. And Jesus was messing with that to the point that Peter had to say, can I talk with you? Could you just keep that kind of talk down? We don't want to be saying that sort of thing. And in fact, it says in the Greek, he rebuked him, which Jesus then immediately turns around and uses the same word, or Mark uses the same word in reply. And Jesus rebuked Peter much more harshly. Get behind me, Satan. Your plans are not my emergency. Your plans are not mine. It is time for you to put aside all of your dreams about being at the head of an army or whatever it was Peter was planning, and listen, going back to where Jenny began.
All right, thank you. As somebody who's busy revising my plans for the next few years, I'll take that on board at a whole lot of levels personally as well, but certainly kind of missiologically. Let's find some good news, and I think it's probably Jenny's time to give us some good news.
Somewhere along the line, I have to say, why do we make so much of Peter's confession when Martha had also got it right? I don't know, that's the good news, really. Martha identified Jesus as the Messiah, and I would necessarily include that if I was preaching on this passage, of course. I think the good news is, while the price of discipleship appeared to be too hard for Peter, in fact, we who like to keep our religion personal and private and like a bit of safety and simplicity, actually getting out there and doing something matters. And so orthodoxy demands orthopraxis. This is the season of creation. The good news is that we're invited to go and live out our faith in making a difference. And for us here, it might be planting some trees in this season. It might be getting together with other churches to explore the natural world. But actually, as disciples, we're urged into doing something.
Yeah, and thank you again for underscoring the women who are getting it so right, who then remained suppressed for 2,000 years, but across the Gospels. But Jerry, unpack for me from Wisconsin some good news.
Well, I can't go the same direction Jenny did because we're heading into winter here. But for me, the good news in this passage is that once we have laid down our lives, once we have denied ourselves, on the other side of that is life. And it is a kind of life that we had not dreamed of. Our plans would not have led there. See, how is it phrased? Who would give his life to own all the world? No one, right? What you are gaining on the other side of all this sacrifice that you're so frightened of is life.
Thank you. Ben, some good news.
I was struck by God's patience and God's self-revelation in this. So the patience that, Peter gets it right and then immediately gets it wrong, but then will get it right again. And so there's that constant patience and forgiveness with him. And then God's self-revelation. So after being acknowledged as the Christ, as the Messiah, Jesus decides not to use that phrase for himself, but rather the Son of Man. I think partly because he's well aware of all of the baggage that comes with the title Christ, and knows what Peter and the other disciples might think of that, and so chooses to reveal God's self in a way that asks us to push a little further and to lay aside some of our presuppositions. And then 6 days later, in Mark's Gospel, we have the Transfiguration. So yet another unveiling, unraveling, another exploration of what we mean by Jesus as the Son of God, as the Christ, as the Son of Man. And so I love that self-revealing of God in this passage.
Lovely, thank you. And let's go and see what all it means for us today. Jenny, for you, so what?
What? It's about taking our faith very seriously, isn't it? It's kind of crunch stuff. And it does mean that we are being called to account by Christ. And it does mean that we are invited to live as people who have been stamped with the branded. I read something very interesting actually about the word may not be cross, but as an instrument of crucifixion, but more like a seal of ownership with which cattle were branded. I'm not sure where I found that. God's seal or sign. And that's all over us, whether we like it or not. We're invited to this life of the cross. And that's where we are. That's who we are. It's inevitable because we're now on this journey. We've been called. Wow.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Yes. Ben, so what?
Me, an invitation to keep asking the big questions. Who is Jesus and who am I? And so what? Those big questions remain part of our gospel, and they remain something that as we grow, as we're in different life seasons and stages, we have quite different answers too. And so it's an invitation to keep returning to those questions. Who do you say that I am? And deny yourself. Well, what is the self that you're denying? What are you being asked to give up? What are you being asked to take up? So returning to those foundational questions.
Thank you. Powerfully relational always. Jerry, so what for you?
I want to go back to what Ben said last time, talking about the process in Jesus' patience, that he waited until they were able to name him for themselves before he pushed them on to the next step. And when they failed this time, he would try again, and they would fail again, and they would try again. The so what is, yay, he does not give up on us, but we have to keep pressing forward. And that's the so what. And also a challenge, I suppose, that this passage is just so full of meaning, but it's meaning about putting old ideas behind, pressing forward, learning something new, accepting something undesirable, and believing in the beauty that lies on the other side. The so what is that this is our journey and we must not stop.
Thanks, Jerry. And
Can I add a PS? Is it possible? No,
well, you can.
PS?
It's probably way over time. I didn't start, but carry on, and we'll see how we use it. Yeah.
If I was preaching on it this Sunday, and I'm actually preaching on something else, and I'll be saying this anyway, I think while he's certainly not the Messiah, I would want to talk about King Tahitia on Sunday about a life of simple service and just getting on with it when he probably didn't want to do it. He wasn't prepared for it, but he did it. And there's something there about the examples that we choose to notice around ourselves as we follow the way of the cross.
Thanks, Jenny. And Jerry, you'll have to look that one up on Wikipedia
or ask a New Zealander sometime.
If you know any.
Okay.
So thank you, all three of you, for that beautiful passage to break open. Jerry, Jenny, Ben, thanks for being on board.
Ka kite. Bye-bye.